Act 1. The Silent Tower. There are places on the edge of the world where the sea meets the sky in a fury of wind and water. Places where humanity holds on by a thread. The Flannan Isles, a small, remote cluster of rocky islands in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland, is one such place. For centuries, these islands were uninhabited, feared by sailors and shepherds alike. A place of ghost stories and ancient maritime lore. At the turn of the 20th century, to guide ships through these treacherous waters, a magnificent lighthouse was built on Eilean Moor, the largest of the isles. It was a marvel of engineering, a solitary tower of stone standing defiant against the might of the North Atlantic. From 1899, its light offered a promise of safety to all who passed. But in the winter of 1900, this beacon of hope became the setting for one of the most unsettling and enduring mysteries in maritime history. The lighthouse was manned by 3 keepers, a rotation of hardy, experienced men accustomed to the profound isolation and the relentless power of the sea. The 3 men on duty that December were Thomas Marshall, a seasoned veteran of the Northern Lighthouse Board, James Duckett, the principal keeper with a wife and 4 children back on the mainland, and Donald MacArthur, the youngest of the trio, a strong but notoriously short-tempered occasional keeper. Their job was simple but vital. Keep the light burning, no matter what. The first sign that something was wrong came on December 15th. The steamer Archdor, on its passage from Philadelphia to Leith, noted in its log that the Flannan Isles light was not operational during a storm. For a brand new, meticulously maintained lighthouse, this was highly unusual. But due to poor weather, the report wasn't immediately passed on to the authorities. The silence from the island continued. The lighthouse was meant to be relieved on December 20th, but severe storms had swept across the Atlantic, delaying the relief vessel, the tender Hesperus. It wasn't until Boxing Day, December 26th, that the seas calmed enough for the ship to make its journey. As the Hesperus approached Eilean Moor, an eerie feeling settled over the crew. The island was unnervingly silent. There was no flag flying from the flagpole, a standard greeting. No relief keepers' boxes had been prepared and left on the landing stage. Captain James Harvey blew the ship's whistle and fired a signal flare, but there was no response from the towering lighthouse. Joseph Moore, a relief keeper, was the first to go ashore. The sense of dread grew with every step he took up the steep rock pathway. He found the main entrance gate to the compound and the lighthouse door both closed. He called out for Marshall, Duckett, and MacArthur. The only answer was the cry of gulls and the sound of the wind. Inside the lighthouse, he found a scene that was both ordinary and deeply chilling. The clocks had all stopped. The keepers' beds were unmade, and a table was set for a meal that had been started but never finished. A single chair was overturned, as if someone had jumped up from the table in a sudden rush. But the most perplexing clue was a set of oilskins, the heavy, waterproof coats essential for survival in the brutal Atlantic weather. 2 sets were missing, but one, belonging to Donald MacArthur, was still hanging on its peg. It suggested that one of the men had rushed out into a ferocious storm without his protective gear, an act that was unthinkable for an experienced keeper. Yet, there was no sign of a storm. The kitchen utensils were all clean and put away. Everything, apart from the overturned chair, seemed neat and orderly. Joseph Moore continued his search, but it was fruitless. The 3 keepers were gone. Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur had vanished from the face of the earth. Act 2. The Logbook of a Doomed Crew. Captain Harvey of the relief ship Hesperus immediately sent a chilling telegram back to the Scottish mainland. It read, "A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan's. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the Occasional have disappeared from the island. The clocks were stopped, and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs, or drowned trying to secure a crane or something." The news sent shockwaves through the Northern Lighthouse Board. An official investigation was launched immediately, led by their superintendent, Robert Muirhead, who had personally recruited and knew all 3 men. Muirhead traveled to Eilean Moor to conduct a thorough search and uncover what could have possibly happened. His investigation revealed more strange and contradictory clues. On the west landing platform of the island, there was evidence of immense storm damage. Iron railings were bent and twisted out of shape. A railway track had been ripped from its concrete moorings, and a massive supply box, weighing over a ton, had been displaced. This suggested that a wave of colossal, almost unimaginable power had crashed over the island, sweeping everything before it. But this discovery only deepened the mystery. If a giant wave had struck the West Landing, why was there no evidence of similar damage anywhere else? And why were the oilskins of the men found inside the lighthouse, suggesting they were not out preparing for a storm? The most haunting piece of evidence was found inside the lighthouse itself, the keeper's logbook. The final entries, written by Thomas Marshall, painted a picture of terror and psychological distress that was completely at odds with the stoic nature of these men. On December 12th, Marshall wrote of a severe storm with winds so strong he had never seen the like in 20 years. He wrote that James Ducat had been very quiet, and that Donald MacArthur, the toughest of the 3, had been crying. This was shocking. What could possibly make a hardened seaman like MacArthur weep? The entry for December 13th was just as grim. The storm was still raging. Marshall wrote that all 3 men had been praying. Again, this was highly uncharacteristic. Lighthouse keepers were trained to face storms. They didn't pray in them as if it were the end of the world. Then came the final, cryptic entry on December 15th. Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all. This was the last message ever sent from the Flannan Isles. The logbook was a bombshell, but it made no sense. There were no official reports of any storm in that area between December 12th and 14th. The weather, according to all surrounding stations and ships, was calm. So what was the storm Marshall was writing about? Was it a localized, freak weather event that went unrecorded? Or was the storm not a literal one, but a metaphor for a storm of fear, madness, or something else entirely that was brewing inside the silent tower? Act 3. Theories from the mist. With no bodies and a set of baffling, contradictory clues, the official investigation concluded that the 3 keepers had been washed away by a freak wave. The official theory, proposed by Superintendent Muirhead, was that during a break in the stormy weather, James Ducat and Thomas Marshall had gone down to the western landing to secure a supply crate. A colossal, unexpected rogue wave crashed over the platform, sweeping both men into the furious Atlantic. Back in the lighthouse, Donald MacArthur, seeing the disaster unfold, would have rushed out in a panic to help his colleagues, explaining why he left without his oilskins, only to be claimed by the next monstrous wave. This explanation provided a plausible, rational answer to a seemingly impossible event. It accounted for the damage on the landing and the missing oilskins. For many, this was the end of the story. But for others, this official theory was full of holes. Why would two experienced keepers venture out together, leaving the lighthouse unattended, an act strictly against the rules of the Northern Lighthouse Board? Why was the last meal left half-eaten, and a chair overturned, suggesting an incident had occurred inside the lighthouse? And most importantly, the theory did nothing to explain the bizarre and terrifying entries in the logbook. This led to darker speculation. Perhaps the tragedy was not an act of nature, but an act of man. Tensions could have run high in the claustrophobic confines of the tower. Donald MacArthur was known to be a brawler with a quick temper. Could a fight have broken out? Perhaps one of the men went mad, killed the other two, disposed of their bodies in the sea, and then threw himself off the cliffs in a fit of guilt. The overturned chair could certainly point to a sudden eruption of violence. However, the lighthouse was found in a remarkably neat and orderly state, with no signs of a struggle or any bloodstains. What if the threat came from outside? Theories of foreign spies, pirates, or even rival nations abducting the keepers were whispered in the years that followed. But these theories lacked any credible motive. Why would anyone want to kidnap or murder three ordinary lighthouse keepers on a remote rock in the middle of nowhere? Unable to find a rational explanation that fit all the facts, many turned to the supernatural. The Flannan Isles had long been a place of superstition, known to locals as the other country. A place where the veil between worlds was thin. Legends told of strange creatures and ghostly apparitions. Some claimed the keepers were stolen by the ghost of a giant bird. Others speculated they were taken by a sea serpent or abducted by a passing UFO. These fantastic theories spoke to the sheer strangeness of the case. The phantom storm, the keepers' inexplicable fear, and their impossible disappearance. They were an attempt to explain an event that seemed to defy all logical explanation. Act 4. The Echoing Silence. In the end, the official verdict for the Flannan Isles mystery was death by misadventure. The Northern Lighthouse Board declared the men lost to the sea, and the case was officially closed. The lighthouse on Eilean Moor was remanned, its great light once again cutting through the darkness of the North Atlantic. But the story was far from over. For years after the incident, keepers stationed at the Flannan Isles lighthouse reported strange occurrences. They spoke of an eerie feeling of being watched, and some even claimed to hear disembodied voices on the wind, calling out the names of the three men who had vanished: Thomas, James, and Donald. The island, it seemed, had held on to the memory of its lost guardians. The mystery of the Flannan Isles has since seeped into our collective culture, becoming a benchmark for eerie, unsolvable disappearances. It inspired Wilfred Wilson Gibson's famous 1912 poem, Flannan Isle, which solidified the most haunting elements of the story in the public imagination. It has been the subject of an opera, a video game, and even a feature film. The story endures because it touches upon our deepest fears: isolation, the overwhelming power of nature, and the terror of the unknown. In recent years, modern researchers have cast doubt on the most sensational parts of the tale, particularly the logbook entries. The original logbook has been lost, and the only account we have is the one transcribed by the investigator, Robert Muirhead. Some historians now believe that the entries describing the men crying and praying may have been exaggerated or even fabricated after the fact to create a more compelling narrative for the official report. If true, it means the only written testimony from the island is itself a mystery. And so, we are left where we began, with an empty lighthouse on a lonely rock. The rational explanation of a freak wave remains the most likely, but it fails to satisfy the haunting questions left behind. The overturned chair, the half-eaten meal, the strange logbook. These details resist easy answers. What truly happened in that silent tower during those dark December days in 1900 is a secret that the island has never given up. The three keepers of the Flannan Isles walked out of their lighthouse and into a mystery that has now lasted for over a century, leaving behind nothing but an echoing silence. What do you believe happened to the keepers? Share your theories in the comments below. And for more of history's most baffling unsolved cases, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Dark Cell Stories.